There you are.
Yeah.
All right.
Hi.
Hey there. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. I can't
Um,
quite see what it's looking like here because they're all words and everything over my face.
oh,
Are we,
really?
are we
Okay.
good? Is this
Yeah,
pretty,
yeah. I see some of the comments underneath, your
uh,
face, but we're good. I see your face.
all right, great. I
You're
see
real.
yours. That's all I care
There's a
about.
real human there, guys. All right.
Hi.
Hi. So this is going to be the first conversation. I don't really know what to name this just yet, but we'll figure it out as we go along. Whatever inspires us, because that's what we do here. We just do inspired action only. Spiritual workout online, spiritual workout. That is, we take intention setting very seriously here. And inspired action is one of those tenets of our intention setting process, spiritual workout style. For
Yes.
folks that don't know, my name is Delilah De La Rosa. I am co-host and producer of Spiritual Workout Online. To my bottom here, that sounds funny.
Underneath you.
My bottom here is Stephen
Easy,
Morrison.
easy.
Is Stephen Morrison. He is the creator of Spiritual Workout and the person who we are speaking with about his popular article and interesting, fascinating for a lot of people article or piece on Medium. So Spiritual Workout has a publication on Medium in which Stephen writes for every day, Monday through Friday, every weekday, Monday through Friday. And this particular piece actually isn't on the Spiritual Workout publication.
Correct.
It's not on the Spiritual Workout publication. However, most people in our spiritual workout community do know of this piece, and it is a very big part of what we do here in spiritual workout. We look at these topics, at issues, questions through the lens of the spiritual part of what it is to be the being part of what it is to be a human being. And so this particular piece, Stephen wrote and posted on his own Medium page account.
Well,
Yeah.
more specifically, it was a response to a challenge within Medium for
Yes.
essays.
Yes.
So death was one of 4 prompts that they gave, and that's the one I took and ran with.
Okay. Wow. Interesting that was one of the 4
Yeah.
prompts. And what were the other ones?
Oh gosh, I don't know because of whatever they were. That was the one that just jumped out at me. They made a somewhat of a point of course, run with whatever this means to you, but also ascribed some meanings. And I really thought that a lot of what they were getting at was it didn't necessarily have to be the death of a person. It could be the death of a relationship, the death of an identity,
The
death of
loss.
all kinds of loss. So anyway, that's how that piece came to pass.
Got it. Okay. Well, it definitely made some waves here I think in our community as well as on Medium. And let's talk about it. Let's talk
Great.
about, the title in and of itself is a bit, it's like, oh, how did he come to this stunning conclusion of there is no such thing as death? And I was already familiar with the spiritual workout perspective on death. And I remember the first time it kind of caught me by surprise because, I've never really heard, I've heard of like life after death, that there's something that continues on,
Mm-hmm.
the spiritual part of we're spiritual beings having a human existence, the being part of human being, that is the part that continues on. And I've already was familiar with that whole concept.
Hmm.
It's just, I think, just like spiritual workout is, it's a practice that you apply into the nitty gritty of everyday life. And so when we are facing death, whether it be, let's just say in this instance, we're talking about death of a person, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, when we're facing that, then that whole concept, oftentimes kind of goes out the window. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of meanings that we apply to this experience or to this event, right?
Yeah.
Which create our experiences of death. And so I remember, in speaking with you, and I forgot when this was, because it wasn't really early on in our friendship
Hmm.
that we talked about this. Even though early on in our friendship, both you and I experienced sort of like the death of a mutual, well, my partner, your
Right.
friend.
Right.
Very early on in our friendship,
Hmm.
he experienced the death of his mother.
Right.
And I don't think this came out back then, you know. And we'll talk about that too, about timing of this
Hmm.
as well. But I don't think it came out back then. But it did come out along the way in our friendship, perhaps when Duder, I think that's when it was, when
It
Duder
was. Yeah.
passed away.
Yeah.
Or it started with your father.
Ah, okay.
Yes.
Which
Yes.
was a year before that. Yeah.
Yes.
And probably a year or so after your partner's mother.
Yes.
It
Exactly.
was all within three,
It was
four
all within like
years.
the three,
Yeah.
4 years there, right?
Hmm.
Um, that yeah, it's like my partner experienced the death of his mom.
Hmm.
You experienced the death of your father. I know we're saying death, even though death doesn't exist,
Yeah.
but we're talking
Well,
about
something dies and
yeah,
something is alive. That's
right,
how I
right.
look at it.
And so then it was your dad, because I remember receiving the note
Mm.
about I'm just gonna say the note,
Yeah.
telling everyone, announcing, right?
Right. Hmm.
I remember hearing that, and it was such a beautiful note, by the way. I never forgot how that stood out to myself and my partner.
Thank you.
And then the next year or so, it was Duder. Now,
Exactly.
Duder was Stephen's
Right.
partner,
It's
love
his
of your life,
nickname
love of your life.
for sure.
Yeah. And I say that in quotes because I put that, that was actually something that you actually said in this piece.
Yeah,
So
that's well, it's a quick way to describe the relationship.
exactly. And so I think it was then that you brought up to me this idea, or like the spiritual workout perspective, your perspective on death. I think it started with your dad because there was something, I feel like I remember something in that note that talked or pointed to that,
Hmm.
and then it really unfolded, like, you expanded
Whole
once
hog.
once Duder passed away, you really went into it. And then, of course, we have, what do we have? The book after that, which
Ah,
is really going into this particular
yeah.
topic. Exactly.
Right.
An extra year,
I just
grief
had
and
this out to
loss.
send to send to somebody.
Yes, grief and loss. After Duder's death, grief and loss, an extra year, grief and loss in the New Age.
Correct.
That book, which I read as well. And that's when I was just like, oh, okay, okay. And
Right.
it wasn't until years later when I was really in the thick and committed to the spiritual workout practice that I really, really got what you were saying in the book,
Mm. Sure.
Um, um, but yeah, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about how you came to this conclusion, because you did not start out that way. I didn't
No.
realize. I knew you gave me a couple of stories before all these more recent deaths. You gave me some
Hmm.
stories about previous things, but I didn't really remember, or I wasn't really all in on the actual stories until I read this piece. So let's
Yeah.
start there, because this, there is no such thing as death, was not
Hmm.
something that you always believed. So,
Correct. And that's for sure what's in that piece that you're talking to about.
yeah.
So where do you want to start? I'm sorry.
Let's start with the because I feel like this was with the death of your best friend's dad
So when I
at
was a
the
kid,
age
in
at
the
the age
early
of
days.
15. This
Yeah.
was like one of the first, I think this was the first time that you were seeing some of the perhaps issues or shortcomings about how we talk about and deal with death.
Yeah, although I probably didn't even see them as that at the time. It was
Right.
more just, wow, this is the way things are. And yeah, being 15 years old, and this guy was, I was super close with my friend and his whole family. The night before his father died, um, I was with him. He was working, he used to work at this store in the neighborhood and closed it at 10 o'clock, and I would go in sometimes and help him. And I did that and said goodnight around 10:15. And the very next morning, my friend called and said, it was Saturday morning, and he said, don't come over, which is the normal thing that I would be doing. He said, my father died of a heart attack. What? It was shocking. Anyway, I'm Jewish, they're Catholic. I'm very well versed in the
That was another
rituals
thing too.
of both. And I thought, wow, this is one thing we do very differently. Like Jews bury their people right away. There's no wake, there's no embalming, there's no public viewing. It's all about body into the ground, and then it becomes very focused on the mourning process and the mourners. This was very different. This was a Saturday morning death. He wasn't buried till the following Saturday.
Hmm.
And in between, there were several days of waiting, and then there was finally the open casket wake, and it was a 2-day wake, afternoon and evening. I was right there, front and center for all of it. And I remember going in, I'm 15 years old, nobody's holding my hand, nobody's guiding me through this process. I'm just doing what friends do.
Be careful with
And,
your mic, Stephen. Sorry to interrupt.
oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Um, doing what friends do. And I remember on the first day, it's like, oh, it just looks like he's sleeping. That's really kind of nice. It was still weird to me because it was 5 days since he had actually died.
Right. I
And I'm
remember you
just
telling
like,
me that that was always very weird
yeah.
to you. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's right, because you have different religious customs. Yeah.
Well, and the thing that I really noticed was the family. In my observation was they were sort of acting like he hadn't died, like as long as we don't do this wake, as long as we don't have this
Mm.
funeral, it wasn't, it was sort of just this big pause button that I noticed. That's what it seemed like to me. And then I went for day 2 of the wake, and I thought, oh God, he looks dead. There was such a, for
Yeah,
me,
I
a
saw that.
distinct difference. But at that time, it's like, okay, you're dead, you're gone. This family was wrecked. He was a sole provider for
Hmm.
boys. His mom was a stay-at-home mom. She didn't have skills. She was never in the workforce, that whole thing. Um, and it really knocked this family out for years, you know, and that was what I saw.
You said here, actually, this was actually the second, I think, monumental death experience that you had,
Hmm.
which was your ex-wife's brothers,
2 brothers,
two
right?
brothers who died in a car accident
Correct.
at the same time,
Right.
overseas.
Right.
It was a shock. And you said here, what did it mean that people could die suddenly and leave in their wakes such profound, lasting pain? I have begun through my studies exploring the notion that there had to be more than what psychology was offering,
Hmm.
more than what clergy was offering, more to the meaning of death. And that really stuck out to me because it kind of reminded me of sort of the genesis of spiritual workout to begin with, right? In that you felt like there was something more that could be done or added in this world of spirituality, personal growth, and personal growth, you know,
Mm-hmm.
um, that traditional therapy wasn't, you were experiencing, it wasn't offering that. And so I'm wondering if this, you know, when I read this particular passage, I was like wondering if this was also part of that Genesis of Spiritual Workout, because it was like, you weren't receiving what I think you felt people that you could have received, as well as people around you who were experiencing this could have received,
Right.
right? And so my question is, when you say, you know, the first family, for instance, your best friend's family, that they
Mm-hmm.
just had a very tough time recovering
Yeah.
from this experience, what would you think, or what do you think could have helped them create a different experience of this?
Well, I hesitate to, say what anybody else should be
Right.
doing, but speaking just very generically, the basic message here is the title of the piece, There's No Such Thing as Death. I think it would have helped them to, you know, do what I now encourage people to do with as light an urging as I usually can, to just leave yourself open to the idea that something is still alive. If we are spiritual beings having human experiences and our bodies die as they do, when I say something is still alive, that is that being part of us, that spiritual part, that spiritual being that was having a human life experience. That experience has come to an end, but what lives on? And how, if at all, can we continue to engage with that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, when I wrote that book 12, 13 years ago, it was just, hey, here's my experience. It's not as awful and horrible as so many other people's. If this will help people, great. It's here. It exists. But I'm maybe 40 degrees more firm today in my asking people or encouraging people, like I just said, to just leave yourself open just to the idea and see. So that's what I think will help people, because we become bereft because this thing that we had is gone. So that belief, it's gone. They're dead. It's over. Some of that's true. Some of that might not be quite as true the way we have always thought. And so that comes down to basic spiritual workout practice. Beliefs matter. What am I believing? So in my own book, in my own story, I realized, I'm like, well, if I say he's gone, but is he really? So he's gone, I couldn't even believe that anymore. So just that's one little example in the process of a belief that I had that's different than most other people's beliefs. That's all. But still
Mm-hmm.
just a belief, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
I believe he's gone, I'm going to experience him being gone. If I believe that something is still alive, then all of my attention is already focused elsewhere. And I'm not in that bereft place. There's nothing wrong with feeling bereft. I know what it's like to there's something was there that is no longer there. That part is true. It's just not the whole truth.
Mm-hmm.
If you ask me, and from my experience.
And you know, it's interesting because you were able to experience this firsthand, when you were able to connect with the psychic medium, right?
Yes.
That was a turnaround. Now, interesting because I just finished reading, I listened to the audiobook, reading Many Lives, Many Masters by
Oh.
Dr. Brian Weiss, right? Am
Mm-hmm.
I saying that
Mm-hmm.
correctly? And that also seemed to be what he felt was real. made him feel more reassured, more comfortable, more empowered in life was to, in my interpretation,
Hmm.
is because he changed that belief about death.
Yeah.
And it was because, I mean, for folks that don't know, Many Lives, Many Masters, Dr. Brian Rice, he was a therapist, right?
Psychiatrist.
Psychiatrist who used hypnotherapy.
Hmm.
And what was coming up with one particular patient was her having this, like, unrelenting anxiety. Even when, doing so many different kind of therapeutic psychotherapy type of stuff, psychiatric type of stuff that would work for so many other folks, this particular person was just continuously anxious and all these different things. Anyway, long story short, he discovers through this particular patient um, past lives,
Hmm.
and how that essentially helped him and his work have a very different perspective on death, which allowed him to lead a much more empowered life and practice,
Yeah.
right? And so it seems as though having that connection with that world, you
Hmm.
know, the spiritual world, the 5D, I guess, the spiritual world, um, is what gives people that sort of like solace, you know? Just like what you were saying, that belief, how that changes, but you were able to really be affirmed in that belief, I think, through this experience with the psychic medium and being able to connect. Just like I see with Many Lives, Many Masters, just like I see folks who are very committed to and honed in on that being part of the human being. And so tell us a little bit more about that, because that's something that I'm always kind of like, I want that too.
You mean the psychic medium connection part?
um just
Well,
that connection part, I
well,
think
I'll.
that for folks who've like received it through, whether it be, Dr. Brian Rice's, like, his patient's connection with the past lives, and seeing that in other patients, I think you were really affirmed with this experience with the psychic medium with Elizabeth, as you
Hmm.
stated here,
Hmm.
that you kept going to her, and it was just more affirming of this belief, of there's something that still is alive here.
Absolutely. And that was years before my partner died. And for me, it all came up. So, when I was 15 in that first experience, then when it was my
What
brothers
led
in
you to
law,
that thing? That was my question here too, because I saw that it was just like, oh, you were seeking some vehicle
yes,
for spiritual growth,
for
and then
sure.
you were introduced to her. So how did that
Yes.
all come about?
Well, I was introduced to her by, I don't remember, oh, it was my boyfriend at the time. He said, "You got to go to this massage
Not Zooter.
therapist." No, this
Okay.
is a few years before him. And he said, "You got to go to this massage therapist. You're going to love her." And I'm not a massage person. I never
Oh,
go
that's
for
right.
massages. He said, "But she does some extra stuff, so just go." So I did. And, the massage part was whatever, but she wasn't doing anything too crazy, and I didn't have any expectations one way or the other. But I left that first session just booking another one. I said, "But can we do it without the massage? Like, I don't need the massage, but I'm interested in," because I think she had a few general statements, but it was like about my body. Well, one of your spirit guides is helping me with this thing in your back, or whatever the heck it was. It was something sort of like that. So I started to get a flavor of that, and I was intrigued by it. But I didn't need to go in there and take my clothes off and have a massage. I'm like, I just want to have these conversations. And so I booked a session with her for the next week. And so I got some hints from her about quote unquote talking to dead people, right?
Right.
And then the whole idea of spirit guides, that's why I was going to go. I was like, okay, I've learned about spirit guides. Now I have this human being who can connect me with my spirit guides. I'm in, let's go. And that's what started it. So between the two first meetings, I developed a question for her that I came in with. And I said, can we talk to somebody specific, or is it just whoever shows up? And then she said, who's Richard? And I'm like, oh God, that's the person I was going to ask her about. And within 2 seconds now, we're having this whole conversation. My friend had died. He died of AIDS. I had no idea that that was the situation. I knew he was sick. I didn't know he was going to die. I found out at his funeral. I was a little pissed off. I'm like, dude, why would you not tell me what's going on? I mean, it was during those days, and it was,
Hmm.
I probably should have known, but I didn't, unless somebody tells me something flat out, I don't make assumptions. And anyway, it was just this incredible conversation. He answered every question I had. We cleared all the air. I walked out of there. I didn't have one single unanswered, unfinished business kind of anything. And yeah, it really just, it's like then the moment and you see, I'm not that skeptical. I was like, this makes perfect sense to me. And there's no, I never talked to her about him. She had no idea. She described him to a T. She's using his language. He's making me laugh the way he always did. He was really funny. And I'm like, okay, he's not dead. His body's dead, but he's not. He's still existing in some way, and I'm able to communicate with him. So then my obsession became, I'm really grateful for you, Elizabeth, psychic person, but I want to do this without you. I want to get to where. So I definitely, and then proceeded to go and see her for a year and a half, like weekly therapy, only it was weekly talk with your spirit guides, and she would see them and introduce me to them, and we would have conversations through her. And it's like two people speaking a different language with an interpreter. It's not more complicated than that. She can just see and hear things and dial into that frequency better than you and I can. um, but I believe firmly that we all can, and we all can do it in kind of different ways. So that all certainly um, took me from the beginning of the decade with my brothers-in-law, which was also then right on the heels of that. I started my psychotherapy thing. Right at the exact same time, I started learning all the spiritual workout stuff. Now I meet her. I had that experience for a couple
Were
of
you always
years.
open to spiritual guides?
No, I didn't even know they existed. I had no idea,
So you
so it
started
was,
becoming open to it when you started getting into the spiritual stuff as you were getting into the therapy stuff.
yeah, all at the same
Okay.
time. So by the time 10 years had gone by, I went from, you're dead in in your worm food and that's the end of it, to, oh no, that's not even remotely true. Then, then began the relationship of my life, and then he died. And so I knew that we would communicate in one way or another because we had a we had a way to do that. They knew each other and all of that, and then that's what transpired, and that's what became the book. And I'll tell you very similarly to what you were saying about Dr. Weiss, which is, I wrote that book because I had a grief and loss experience that I say, expanded my soul and
Yes.
absolutely increased my capacity to love. And he died almost 16 years ago now, and he's still around. We still have a relationship. It's not, you know, an unhealthy, clingy, weirdo thing. It's just he's a presence in my life. I've had in my physical life, friends that we make, and we hang out and spend a lot of time, and then people move and you don't see them as much, or you have, I'm friends with a fair number of exes that I've had, right? I mean, relationships change form all the time. Marianne Williamson talks about that all day long in the Course of Miracles, right? So when we leave open the notion that something is still alive, then that also creates an opportunity to have a relationship with what is still alive, right? And so if we know and believe and trust and see and experience that relationships do in fact change form, this is just another way that a relationship can change form. And so that's all I ever see happening anymore, you know?
I liked that passage in this piece, and I know that you've mentioned it quite a couple of times to that whole idea of how this loss, quote unquote, expanded your soul and increased your capacity to love. How? What does that really mean? Expanded your soul?
That's a good question. It veers into this space of where we start to talk about the more ethereal, more spiritual things. I certainly struggle for the words. So what does it mean? It just means that, so I knew myself to be who I was, as, reasonably okay person, with nice relationships, friends and romantic relationships on both sides of the aisle, if you will. And, you know, after he died, so whatever that baseline was what it was. I am a person who has nice, good relationships with people. Um, I'm good with children. I can be loving and compassionate toward other. Not just whatever it was what it was. Then he died. We start immediately having a lot of communication. So I now am just seeing more and feeling more expansive. I don't know how to describe it other than that. It's just like the it's like
You're
maybe
able to go
climbing
beyond the mind, beyond the senses.
beyond the mind. So now we're into the metaphysical, beyond, which is what spiritual workout is based on, that we're spiritual beings, and what do our issues and problems look like from that perspective. And so it's sort of maybe, Delilah, like climbing a ladder, and then you're fine, you see what you see what you see, and then there's that one step, and wow, you see a whole lot
Yeah.
more.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
just sort of like that. I didn't see everything, but I saw a whole lot more. And so then, because he and I remained connected, I wasn't so much dragging him down to stay here. Well, there was some of that, but then it was also him inviting me out there more, So that's another way in which it expanded awareness, just in terms, so it's not just me sitting here in my house in 3D on the planet with my dead partner. Now you're going to coming and hanging out with me, right? It's now he's going to also, pull me a little bit more in that direction. And so the increased capacity to love is just, I've heard moms talk about it all the time. They are who they are. Then they have a baby and they love more, and then they have another baby and they love more, right? And so it just feels to me like some version of that same thing. The more you see, the more you connect. I'll never forget the day that I came home, and this was, a few months into my grief and loss process, a few months after he died, and I came home and I took all his pictures down.
Hmm.
Not in any terrible way. I didn't plan it. I was in no mood about it. I was just looking at these pictures and I thought, beautiful as you are, the relationship we're having now, and it feels like this is not who you are anymore.
How long was it after he passed?
That I did that,
Yeah.
probably several months.
Okay.
But then if you want to hear a tail end to that, so I just had occasion to find some old stuff, old boxes and things I haven't seen in some time. And sure enough, poof, here's a picture of him. So it's like, hi. I haven't seen this picture in 10 years. And now it's really delightful to have the picture, So at some state, it's just listening to inspiration, what feels right. And again, I didn't plan to do it. I just walked in the house. I'm like, yeah, that's not you anymore. That's not you anymore. You're here, you're not there. You did. Yeah. But that has since changed again too. So.
Yeah. I always, it's funny because there was a funny line in this piece where in one of the earlier sessions with psychic medium Elizabeth,
Mm-hmm.
um, where you talk about, I guess, speaking with your grandmother and two aunts, and you never met your grandmother because she passed away when you were 2.
Well, I didn't remember her.
Right, you didn't
She
remember
met
her.
me.
Right,
Yeah,
right. And I just loved how you talked to your mom, who was, at the time she was alive, and told her that you were talking to her mother, right? It was her
right,
mother.
right, yeah,
And she was just like, get out of my face with that.
right. Yeah, wanted, couldn't even, yeah, had no room for it at all.
Because, this gets into a very woo-woo territory, you know, um, for a lot of people. It's not the most conventional way we talk about death, even
Well,
though it's very common to hear these stories, about people connecting with folks who are not here 3D, physical form. Um, but I like to talk about because this is kind of where I know, and this kind of goes a little bit into like feeling self-conscious about spirituality,
mm-hmm,
and like the woo-woo of it all, because this
mm-hmm,
goes beyond the mind. This goes
exactly.
beyond the senses. This goes beyond what we can see, hear, smell, touch. For most of us, right? I mean, there's
Mm-hmm,
a whole thing we could break down the clairvoyant, clair something. You break it down several times
yeah,
in spiritual workout. But in terms of like, the senses as we know it here in physical form, we're not able, to see, hear, whatever, touch folks and stuff. This is more connection on a metaphysical level. And so
mm-hmm,
that's just like way beyond people's understanding,
mm-hmm.
and some people really scoff at this type of. So have you encountered that where people, I
Well,
mean, I know you've encountered people rolling their eyes, like your own mom rolled her eyes,
right.
you know, but just folks who are kind of like offended or just,
Well, look, there are some people who will be offended. It goes against their belief systems, and I don't. This is why I say, like in the beginning, I was just totally laissez-faire. Here's a book; it exists in the world. Probably nobody's going to see it anyway. If it helps a few people, fine, whatever. It is what it is, and it was. I did what I did with it, and it will always exist. Um, I don't go knocking on people's doors,
right.
evangelizing for, hey, you know, on.
Or like
And
this would make you
yet,
feel better if you just
right.
believe this.
Well,
Yeah.
including my late partner's family,
Yes.
because not only did their 36-year-old son die of cancer, their a different son died at 23 of cancer. They
Oh,
have two, and
okay.
it's the pain in that family is I don't want to use this word, but it's virtually permanent, right? The
Oh,
their
explain that, please.
Well, their view, and this is not a judgment
No.
by any stretch of the imagination. This is how do we, well, it's not a judgment at all, but they have older thoughts and more traditional beliefs about what happens and death, and they're religious people, and to some degree, and their faith carries them in the way that it does. Uh, and I know there's also a lot of pain because of two of their three children are gone. Uh, but they don't experience any of the kind of stuff that we're talking about here. And I can't help but believe that it would certainly be helpful for anybody. But it's not going to help if you don't believe it's possible, or if you don't believe it's um, benevolent to do so, or whatever the beliefs are. So this is why I don't go knocking on doors, but it's also why I'm a little about 40 degrees, a little more firm than I used to be, because
Mm.
as a therapist and as a spiritual workout facilitator, I know for a fact that there is pervasive, unprocessed grief, specifically related to death of humans and deaths of humans and deaths of
That's what I
pets.
wanted to go in.
Let's just keep it right
I
there.
want to go into that because you mentioned that the
Pervasive.
unprocessed
It's
part.
palpable. And so I don't knock on doors, but I'm always eager to have conversations like this and write pieces like that and be a little bit more open about it. You know, I've had a couple of quote unquote recent deaths that I even talk about in that piece, right? And so it's case by case. I have one close dear friend. I mean, I'm not going to say a word to her about this because she's just not in that space. I have another person, and she's much more open, even though it's brand new for her, right? So, I'm certainly an advocate for expanding the conversation around what we call loss and for redefining what grief actually is. Um, but I'm not here to um, to
Visualize.
impose that
Yes.
on anybody.
Yeah, it's like as soon as someone's loved one dies, you're not going to be like, well, something still lives.
Right? No, and that's not my style. But I know there are
Never,
other people who
never.
are.
I can attest to
There,
that, folks.
yeah,
Like, that's
yeah.
not
So
Stephen's
what did?
style, which is what I love because that just shows that how much of not a charlatan you are.
Well, that's good.
Because you sense that from people, when they're trying to impose. Like they may have good intentions, in terms of like, I feel like this can help, can help ease the pain or, the grief, right? Um, and yet it comes off differently because it's like there's judgment involved in that when you're imposing, you
Correct.
know
It's all
it's
judgment.
basically almost like telling that person that their experience should not be their experience, right? And so I definitely am practicing more of that because I can sense myself sometimes being like, if only you were aware of this may help, right?
Hmm.
um but I'm practicing.
We all are.
I'm practicing. But I wanted to talk about that, about the unprocessed grief that shows up, because you mentioned that there's a passage here that I highlighted saying profound, unbounded, unprocessed grief presents itself to me in my work in multiple ways, as a matter of course. And while there are many variables, there is also a family of beliefs we tend to have that contribute to our grief. And one of the most fundamental of the bunch is the belief that our loved ones are dead and gone.
Right. When it was my brothers-in-law, I was 31 years old.
But I thought you were
There,
28. What are you talking?
uh, here we are again. Like last time I was down this road, I was 15, whatever, and I remember, this is my wife's two brothers and her parents and everyone else around, and I just remember like I'm supposed to act in a certain way. I'm supposed to be bereft. I am supposed to be pounding my heart. I am right, and I kind of went along with that. I'm part of the family here, and I'm also an outsider, and not, and like I don't crazy stuff. But
Mhm.
it felt like this is how you're supposed to be when somebody dies, especially a tragedy like this. Two young people before their
I was
time, and
going to go
all of it.
you're beating me to the punch, but yes, tragedy. Yes.
So there's so much. This is how one behaves in that situation. And I remember because at that time in my life, that was my MO, was just, you know, what do we do in this life? What are the rules? Okay. And I'm good at learning what the rules are and following them, and I just, I can notice it now looking back that there was a big part of me already that was like, I feel like I'm just play acting here. But I didn't have the other piece. I didn't. It's like if I'm not going to go along with what everybody else is doing, what am I
Then
doing?
what am
I
I
didn't.
going to do?
Yeah, there was
Exactly.
nothing there. But
Right.
I can tell now that there was at least a pretty strong hint in my own system uh, that was bubbling up, if you will, that there's something more to this than what I was, what I felt like I was being told to do. Not that those days in that family, but by culture
Big picture, right.
and my religion.
Right, right. That's what you talk. Um,
So did we answer your question about
yeah,
that?
yeah, no, just
Okay.
about well, yeah, just about that particular belief,
That
right?
belief, right? They're dead and
Yeah,
gone.
that they're dead and
Hmm.
gone, and how that dictates people's experiences, where,
Exactly.
right?
Right.
And you needed that missing piece to see, like, okay, I'm not feeling this way because there's something
Right.
in you, maybe you couldn't articulate, you didn't have the words for it,
Correct.
you didn't have that piece of it to
Right.
know that that other part where you could really felt was more authentic to you. You needed a little more
Yeah, I needed a lot more.
experience, wisdom,
Yeah.
that missing piece.
And it came in short order after that.
Yes.
It all
Yeah.
for me personally, it all just unfolded.
I have so a question that I have, and I always bring this up to you because this was something like as we started getting to know each other more and more and started working together more closely, we started talking about um, having this perspective on death and that it doesn't actually exist, right?
Hmm.
What do you do now when you're invited to memorials and funerals, and or when you get the bit of news that someone close or someone that's close to someone else passes away, like, or we hear some tragic news from a celebrity or something, a prominent figure that has just like really touched people's hearts, and it's like, what
Hmm.
happened, how did that, I mean, coming off of this year and change, and a half, or over a year and a half of this
Hmm.
pandemic, which is real, everyone. Okay, by the way. Um, but yes, where, people experienced, I myself included, a lot
Hmm.
of people who passed away in a short time,
Hmm.
um, and some due to COVID, some, not related to COVID. But definitely, I experience that narrative that we had in the pandemic of, people dying because of this illness, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, how do you navigate that now, as a spiritual perspective, as a spiritual workout guy, with
Well,
this perspective on death? How do you navigate that? Because I'm still practicing.
I'm still practicing too. So, at some point I noticed that I was not appreciating being at some funerals or memorial services, not because I have anything. I'm a huge fan of ritual, and I actually think
Me
some of our
too.
death rituals across all different kinds of cultures are really beautiful,
Me too. Me
um,
too.
really and truly. So I have
Exactly.
zero about that. But I just remember just feeling so discordant, like I'm just in a completely different headspace than every single person there, and I'm not contributing anything. And so it's not like I have a policy. I have no blanket policy. It's very case by case. But I have noticed in the last several years, there have been plenty of funerals and memorial services that I did not go to. But then also very recently, there was one that happened, and I was felt compelled. If I feel compelled, inspired action, then I'm going to do it. So I don't know if you want to get into more detail about that, but it's no different than being a new consciousness person in an old consciousness world. It's just a little more
That's
concentrated
that's what this.
in
Yeah,
that. But
yeah.
it's no different than my regular life. Like everywhere I go, I'm in a different place than most people. It's not the only one. There's nothing unique or special about me, but it's just a consciousness. And my own personal consciousness has shifted so much in life in general and as it pertains to this subject that, again, if I feel like there's some reason for me to be there or that I can make some contribution, or if somebody just says, I need you to be there, just be there, then for sure. But I've also declined to attend a lot of them. And nobody missed me. It's okay. But I really do it case by case.
So
Just
how
in
do
the
you
similar.
respond? My so okay, so that's one with actually accepting the invitations, right? What
Hmm.
how do you respond though when you get a phone call, right?
Hmm.
From let's say your friend here, the couple that you knew, where one of
Yes.
them died of cancer. This was
Hmm.
actually more recent.
Hmm.
And I think you may have already been aware of the husband's experience. Like
Yeah.
he
So
was,
this is a
he
friend of
was
mine. They're
the
couples.
health
They're
was
couples.
deteriorating.
Yeah, I knew it was not looking good.
Right.
And then the call came. So again, this is case by case.
Okay. So I
So
want to know, so here's the question that
yeah.
I'm getting at is you get the call and it's like so and so died, right? Usually people will respond, I'm so sorry. My condolences. I'm so sorry.
Hmm.
Do you continue to do that?
No, I can't find it in me anymore to say I'm sorry. Because
Okay.
what am I sorry for? This person's having a life experience and now they're experiencing loss. I'm not sorry for anybody's experiences in that way. We're all here and if I'm saying I'm sorry, then that must mean I believe all kinds of things that I
That's
actually
what,
don't believe.
so
So here's what I
what do you
do.
say?
So in the instant that I get a call, if it's actually something, whether I've been expecting it or not, I immediately start communicating with the person who's left the body. And I just start to offer them um, prayer, if you will, communication, just a blessing, acknowledgement. May your journey be light and easy. May you be warmly held and loved and welcomed, and congratulations and good for you. And I'm here if I can ever be. So I for sure immediately devote some energy to that. It could even be while I'm still having a conversation with the person who's giving me the news. Or I'll do it also, of course, is relationship dependent. Not everybody that's special to somebody else has been that special to me. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
So it depends, but for sure I'm doing that.
And what do you say to the person delivering the news? The person's like, oh man, he died.
I'm so, I know you have a lot going on. I really appreciate the call. I'm so curious to know what things are like for you right now. Something like that, you know. Obviously, if it's that immediate, they're usually in the throes of making plans and all that kind of stuff. So I just do
What if
my
they're calling
best.
you distraught, like, crying and like,
Oh, and if they wanted to, then that's a totally different. Then that's somebody asking for some degree of assistance. In which case, I will almost always ask some version of the question: do you have any sense that they're still around? Have you noticed anything, or felt anything? And I've never had somebody say no to that. But
because
99% of the time, they're like, well, yeah, I was pretty sure that when I went to bed the other night, da da da, this and that. And they'll tell this whole vivid description of, a really beautiful, what I'm hearing as a beautiful connection. And then they don't even stop talking before they merge right into, well, I'm sure I was just imagining things, and they talk themselves right out of it. So if anything, that's the piece that I'm maybe 40% more uh, uh, firm about. That's not the right word, but a little bit more, um, a little bit more. What's the right? It's not aggressive, but just a little bit more
I would say firm.
firm
Yeah.
in terms of just making sure that I'm introducing that idea. Because if we're going to have a conversation and they end the conversation entertaining the idea that something is still alive, then I feel like I've done something helpful.
Stephen, we have less than a minute remaining to
Oh,
this live. They're going to cut us off in less than
okay.
a minute. I don't know if you want to continue on or
I'm happy to if you'd like
okay,
to.
yeah, let's do that because I want to tack on another question to this particular thing
Okay.
because
So
I
what do I
want
do?
to do like a scenario, like because
Okay.
this is what I'm dealing with, and I want to know. Give me some examples of
Sure.
how I can stay aligned with my beliefs here while also being supportive,
Yeah.
people. Okay,
Sure. So
so
what?
we'll come back on right now.
Just stay right here.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, I'll stay right here.
Yes, I'll invite you back up again.